Jake, do you find within the artists that you are working with that there's that a sort of a dividing line between those who want to do the touring, the traditional route as songwriters and performers, versus those that want to stick with, predominantly doing syncs and placements? And is there a transition that happens with artists where they start in one place and end up someplace else?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think of it as much in terms of a dividing line. I think of it more as an almost eventual transition. And, I think it kind of it can happen slowly, and it can also be pretty closely aligned with the artist, their, how do I put this? Hitting new milestones in their life and maybe not wanting to be on the road as much. So whether that's represented in getting married and having a kid or two and maybe hitting your 40th birthday and like having grounded out, or your 30th birthday, whatever, having grounded out in a van for 10 years and been like, that was a really important part of my life. And I'm kind of over that. And like in the meantime, the last year or two, I've seen some cool things happen with some songs I've been writing that were kind of for fun, but like that's becoming more important to me now. And the other thing that I thought was important, it's not so much important, because and I don't know, if it's 20-year-old artists that'll be watching this, or 25 or 45, but things that used to seem important in life can fundamentally change as you get older. And then other things come into light, or you think of things differently, or you see things differently. And you don't know that that's going to come necessarily. So there will always be artists who are stars, and they should be on an arena stage, and they should be crushing it, lighting up millions of people's lives. And they can be doing this either supplementally, or the songs that they're writing anyway are just such bangers that they're going to be going out and getting licensed, whether it's the Imagine Dragons of the world or whatever. And then there's a good chunk of artists and writers who are like, yeah, I put in my time. That was a really important time in my life. Things have fundamentally changed. I'm really enjoying writing and being part of a community and staying home a lot more and getting a cup of coffee with a friend at 1 o'clock and not being in like Jacksonville, Florida on the way to my next night. And so there ends up being this transition that can take, it usually takes a couple of years for someone that it really strikes a chord with. And then they settle in and they're like, yeah, this is a really good change. And then if you really throw gas on that fire and they really double down, then it can be sort of a game changer and a life changer. And so that's the best way I can put it from the many artists and writers that I've seen go through that. I'll put it this way. Very few who've had a fair amount to a lot of success in the sync world are then like, screw that. I'm going to go get back in a van and drive around with 4 other smelly people and for 6 months and play to like 90 people.
Mike, he's telling the story, I think, of Ice Nine Kills in almost like real time. I mean, you got that awesome placement during the World Series with the Yankees for the song Savages. Like, how did that come about, and how has that or has that changed Spencer's perspective on placements and syncs and in the same way that Jake's talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Michael touched on it earlier where, we kind of come from the same world. Maybe my rosters have been a little bit more hard leaning on the metal side, but a very similar process. And, you mentioned the song Savages, which Ice Nine Kills has a song called Savages. And that was really, I don't want to say, I mean, it was kind of a freak thing, right? Like, I think somebody from the Yankees organization or somebody called the Yankees Savages. Right. And really our artist is the one who tipped us off to it. I mean, the guy's from Boston, but he said, look, I mean, I believe that sometimes things happen for a reason. There's a song, they've used this term, they're going into the playoffs. I don't think the Yankees actually made it to the World Series, all hands on deck. Let's figure out a way in and figure out a way to pitch. And, thankfully, even though, the record label who doesn't own, the composition side of our music, on the master side, they had some ins and, got it into the right hands. And lo and behold, I think there was a number of songs that were up against it. And for whatever reason, they probably didn't know the band was from Boston. They chose the track and, you know, it was a real highlight for him, you know, for this artist that's been grinding it out for a long time. His dad lives in New York. We got him tickets to the game. He went and saw it up on the Jumbotron. And, you know, yeah, that's a really exciting moment for an artist. And I can see how, you know, the process Jake describes, it's interesting because though I haven't really had that with many of my artists, you know, it's the same that I see a lot of people like myself who were once a tour manager, then move into another realm of the business. You know, it's like, do I really need to be out on the road anymore? And the hardest part, right, is trying to figure out what during that interim period, you know, if you're doing well on the road, transitioning off the road, no matter what, you've got to have a way to have some income. So really fascinating discussion.
Yeah. Naaman, there's been some talk about genres and, you know, the punk, metal, and all the rest of it. Like, are there certain genres that are more appropriate for syncs in general, or maybe even specifically for video games that you keep an eye out for, genres that you just like don't bother with at all?
Oh man. I mean, obviously for music supervision as a whole, it runs the gamut completely from classical to black metal, you know, it goes all the way. For video games specifically, I keep my ears open for a lot of hip hop, electronic, rock. Any combination of those three works really well. It just depends on kind of the genre of the game. If you've got something more action oriented, you're gonna want more action, upbeat kind of stuff. Sometimes there's fun ways to incorporate other sounds. Like one of my, unfortunately, I didn't get to work on this, but one of my favorites in recent memory is The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2, using a lot of like the composer Gustavo's really like kind of calming, but it also comes off as a bit eerie acoustic guitar licks, and
That's awesome. I'll throw this question, Jake and Michael, if one of you guys can really jump on this. It just seems like, you know, there's been a lot of evolution in placements in that there used to be just 3 TV channels broadcasting. Now there's tons of narrowcasting and maybe even some opportunities in new digital media. Jake, you had mentioned earlier that there was a lot of it's competitive because of so many people wanting to get these placements, but are there also more opportunities now than before?
I mean, yeah, hands down. So I mean, there's more people listening to music than ever before in history. There's more music than ever before, and there's more opportunities for it than ever before. And we could break down all the different media and all the different avenues within all that different media. Just know that there are a lot of opportunities, whether it's because there's more media or there's more Netflix and you're adding these, but also if you go into advertising, I mean, Facebook has their own types of ads, Instagram has their own types of ads, TikTok. You can break it down, and that's part of Naaman's job. Is he's having to probably determine what properties does Call of Duty want to use for this advertisement. Is it going to be a swipe up campaign? Is it going to be a storytelling campaign on Facebook? That stuff's all new, and there's things going on. We get inquiries into our company of things that we weren't even aware of. I was researching a VR company today that just sold to Facebook 6 months ago, and I'm like, how are they not on my radar? And what are their needs? There's another conversation I had with a company that will be huge in about a year and a half, that have some really big heavy hitters that are reaching out to some other really big video game and sports companies. And the whole game takes place. It's hard to describe. It's like a festival for different brand properties that you and your avatar live in as you pop around to different brands. And those are all going to need their own music and their own genres. And it needs to feel like it's, I don't know, that it needs to be compelling music, and it needs to feel like it flows really easily. Anyway, point is, there's a lot of different opportunities that people aren't even aware of yet. And that also opens up the type of music that will be needed as well, which Naaman sort of alluded to. But there's areas that need ambient music. There's other areas that or media that needs. I mean, Mike, referenced the Savages song. That kind of runs the gamut right there between almost experimental ambient music all the way up to hard, to heavy metal type music and anything in between. The nice thing about a lot of these networks is, and even YouTube and whatnot, is it's allowed for the real growth of niche sort of programming. And when you get niche programming, that means they know, those programmers know what kind of music they need. And that kind of need may not have existed 5 or 10 years ago. And now, because there's an outlet for it and a demand for it, that, there might be like light piano music that nobody really cared about, that now there's a massive YouTube channel for, that has hundreds of millions of followers, and they need to be pushing content through, and Content ID is generating money for everybody involved, which is just a different type of licensing, really.
Gotcha. And Michael, with your clients, are your clients identifiable with certain niches, either creative niches or as far as the music that they're creating, or are they flexible, and is it dependent on artists? Is it make it easier for supervisors and publishers to identify an artist with a certain sound, rather than being able to say, we can do anything you want?
Yeah, I think those are great questions. When I started working more with writers and producers, I actually started on the side where we were pitching to other artists, right? So there's a few kind of different categories that this all breaks down into. But if you have a team of people and they're like, hey, we want to pitch this song for Katy Perry or Demi Lovato or whatever, right? Sometimes artists take outside songs and then put their own fingerprints on them. And sometimes, they don't want to take outside songs and they only want to do their own. But there's enough that want to take outside songs that we were starting to work with artists who were becoming very well known in their own space as artists. So we said, okay, why don't we, have them work a little bit for these other artists. Makes sense. I think the problem we were running into when we went that direction, right, is if you're writing for a very well-known specific, pop artist, you have the spectrum here, and every song that's going to get pitched to that major label artist is really going to go from here to like here, right? Everything's going to fall within this zone. So you have all this out here and you have all this space out here that's just not going to be even looked at. And especially when you're in this space, right, you're competing against some of the biggest and best writers and producers in the world, right? So you're working against Max Martin, you're working against Benny Blanco, like you're working against these people. So for us, as a management company, said, well, we either have to get our artists to a point where they're going to be better, right, than Benny Blanco. And we had the good fortune of working with Benny on some of my artist tracks, and Benny's phenomenal, right? He's one of the best for a reason. So how are you going to be better than that? It's very tough. So the route that has worked, and we've seen this with some of our peers, is they said, you know what, we're not going to go head to head, right? We're going to go find this other route. We have to be different enough and either start a new sound or a new style, or there was a big producer who came in who really rethought what a chorus was, right? And a lot of the choruses became instrumental choruses in pop music that kind of had the own hook within the instrumental, right? So that was their unique take on what pop music would look like. When we start to look more into this space, for me as a manager, I'm sometimes more interested in what are these genres and niches that are being overlooked, right? And so I think this plays very much into Jake's point. I think one of the most successful projects we ended up ever having is we had a phenomenal writer-producer who didn't fit into a traditional box in any sense. And, before they were working with us, they were pitching for these big, top 40 type of things. And they were kind of so far afield that they weren't landing with these places. And we ended up finding, I mean, literally like a violin player on YouTube and connecting them. And their first album together, you know, like went, I think it like went gold in like 20 countries or something like that. No one would expect that to happen. But if you're able to sort of, like, a big part of what we do, and I think everyone on this panel would agree, is like matching the right people. And there's just like, when I came more from the touring world, there'd be artists that you have never, ever, ever, ever heard of who are out there selling 5,000 tickets a night, right? Anywhere in the world, they can go somewhere and play 5,000 tickets in there. They're like, I've never heard of this person. How is this possible? And yet it's a massive, big business for these like niche type of artists. And I think that does still exist in this world. Some are more common than others, but I think getting creative and figuring out how can I take what I'm really good at, maybe it's not traditional pop music or traditional alt pop music or whatever that is, but how can I take that and study what is working and combine all of this together and try and find success on my own terms. And I think that's very exciting for everyone here.
Yeah.